For tonight, we walk toward a city carved from pale hilltop stone, a place where moonlight once paused, as if unsure whether to stay or go. The gate where moonlight lingered too long. It is said that every night carries a question, and that some questions arrive not as words, but as a breath drawn softly through ancient spaces. And so, beneath the silver hush of twilight, a gentle wandering drifts across the forgotten world. What memory does stone keep after the world forgets to ask it? Let this question be your lantern. For tonight, we walk toward a city carved from pale hilltop stone, a place where moonlight once paused, as if unsure whether to stay or go. A sanctuary where countless nights rested like folded wings atop roofs worn smooth by centuries of wind. And in this quiet hour, we follow the path that leads into its sleeping heart. At first, all we see is the drifting shimmer of dusk, a soft veil settling over a landscape touched by the thinning light of another vanished day. The city emerges gradually, like a memory rising from a deep, calm sea. Pillars softened by time. Archways half crumbled into pale dust. Terraces shaped like crescent moons, climbing the slope of the hill. The color of everything around us is gentle and muted. Sand beige walls kissed by faint copper light, shadows traced in the dusk sky blue. It feels almost as though the city exhales as we step closer. Beneath the silence, something shifts. A small whisper of movement that might simply be the settling of stone, or perhaps the quiet recognition of our arrival. Whispers tell us that the people who once lived here carved their homes to catch the exact angle of moonrise, not as astronomers charting the heavens, but as dreamers seeking to mirror the sky's serenity. In forgotten corners of the earth, such devotion is rare, a city built not for conquest, but for listening. And so, as twilight deepens, we cross the threshold where the first alleyway curls inward, slow and winding like a river of stone. Nothing stirs. No voices, no footsteps, no sound beyond the soft wind folding around the old walls. Yet the silence here is not empty. It watches. It remembers. It invites. We drift along a narrow passage, our footsteps hushed against smooth stone. The air holds a coolness touched by distant sea winds. A pale dust rises gently with every step, stirred like the faint breath of the memories waking from long sleep. Every one step beneath us feels like an echo preserved in grain and mineral. It is said these passages once glowed under the sweep of countless lanterns. The city, perched high above the desert plains, would ignite softly each evening, its terraces shimmering like constellations fallen to earth. Now those lanterns are long gone, but in certain corners, the moonlight catches the stone just right, and it appears as if the city still remembers how to shine. We turn beneath an archway carved with spirals. Ancient, oceanic shapes that feel less like ornament and more like the patient turning of the cosmos itself. Some believe these markings were not symbols, but instructions. Ritual pathways guiding moonlight deeper into the city's interior chambers, so the inhabitants could follow its wandering glow as one follows the slow cadence of a sacred chant. Here, in this silence, it is easy to imagine them, moving through these halls barefoot, carrying offerings of crushed herbs and waters drawn from hidden springs, breathing prayers meant not for gods, but for the sky itself. Beneath the silence, we hear the faintest ripple of that ancient rhythm. Not as sound, but as memory. The city's design reveals itself gradually, like a long-forgotten song returning note by delicate note. Each chamber aligns with the moon's journey. Each courtyard bends toward the soft silver arcs of lunar cycles. Each rooftop once carried silent watchers who mapped the heavens, not with ink and parchment, but with patient devotion. It is said they believed the moon did not simply shine. It listened. Every shadow cast by moonlight was a form of speech. Every shifting beam, a reply. And so these pale corridors were carved to hold that fragile dialogue, shaping light into something sacred. Now we stand inside one such chamber, a wide hall where the ceiling opens into the night. The frame of the aperture is cracked with age, but still elegant, still deliberate. Moonlight spills through it like liquid silver, slow and unhurried, pooling across the floor where faded star marks still cling to the stone. No voice interrupts this stillness. No echo returns from the far walls. Only the soft pulse of the moon remains, steady and patient. Perhaps this is why the city feels so alive despite its emptiness. Because it was never built to house people alone, but to cradle light itself. We wander deeper, past a collapsed portico where vines hang loose like forgotten threads, past a round plaza where dust collects in gentle spirals, as though shaped by invisible hands continuing an ancient rite. Fragments of pottery rest beneath the outer wall, paint flaked away, yet still marked with tiny crescents. Offerings once placed beneath the open sky, now surrendered to the drifting sands. Somewhere in the distance a faint sound rises. Not a call, not a cry, but the soft breathing of wind filtering through broken slats and hollow beams. It feels like a hymn returning to a temple that no longer expects worship. Where memory fades, the city remains tender. Its contradictions unfold in quiet layers. A sanctuary built for eternity, yet abandoned without explanation. A civilization that charted the heavens, yet left no farewell carved into its walls. Some say they vanished by choice, that when the moonlight touched the city in a certain way, a path opened that was meant only for them. Others whisper that they followed a silence deeper than any prayer, seeking a horizon beyond even the farthest star. But perhaps the truth is simpler. Perhaps all that remains of them is what we feel now, this gentleness, this waiting, this sense that time does not erode everything. It simply softens what once was bright until it glows quietly in the dusk. The alleys narrow, the wind stills. A subtle shift in temperature tells us we are nearing the city's heart. Ahead, a faint radiance curls around a corner, like moonlight caught on the edge of an unspoken secret. We follow it with slow, dreamlike steps, as though drawn by a memory we cannot name. The path opens suddenly, revealing a terrace overlooking the darkened plains far below. The sky above feels impossibly vast, its stars thin and trembling like distant bells. And there, half swallowed by night, half cradled in silver glow, stands a stone gate, tall, weathered, patient. Its pillars curve inward slightly, forming a crescent-shaped threshold where the moon seems to settle as though resting its weight on ancient shoulders. The gate is carved with symbols too faded to decipher, yet each one feels familiar. Spirals, arcs, star marks, traces of stories the city remembers even if we do not. Moonlight pulls along its edges with an almost reluctant softness, as though unsure whether to pass through or linger a little longer. We approach slowly. The dust beneath the arch is undisturbed, yet something in the air hums with gentle expectancy. Not a warning, not a welcome, simply the quiet knowledge that we have reached a place meant for listening. Here the world thins, the night deepens, and the city's final secret breathes just beyond the threshold. Not as fact, but as emotion, a soft ache where meaning lingers just out of reach. We stand before the gate without crossing it. Some passages are not meant to be taken. Some doors are meant only to be witnessed, the way one watches the horizon at dawn, knowing the sun will rise whether or not we call its name. The moonlight slips a little lower, painting the stone in tender hues of pale gold and silver blue. For a moment, the gate glows as if remembering a time when it opened for those who understood its purpose. Then the glow softens, fades, becomes the quiet hush of night once more. Perhaps the moon lingered too long here, drawn by something it could not forget. Perhaps the city still speaks to it in a language of cracks, dust, and patient stone. Or perhaps some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. We let the silence gather around us. A warm, drifting veil settling softly across the mind. The path behind us dissolves into shadow. The wind stills. The air becomes tender and cool. And the city, quiet in its veil of dust, waits. Not for discovery, not for revival, but for another wandering dreamer who will pause long enough and gently enough to hear the faint hush of its secrets. For now, you carry that hush with you as you drift deeper into night, guided by a gate where moonlight once lingered just a heartbeat longer than it should. The scrolls that softened in the salt wind, that there is an island the maps no longer name. A quiet stone in the vastness of the sea, drifting in the outer memory of the world. Sailors who pass near it claim the horizon bends differently there, as if the sky leans down to listen, as if time itself softens its breath. On this island, in a corner the tides seldom reach, there stands a shrine made of pale, weather-worn rock. Its pillars lean like old monks bowed in eternal prayer. Its carvings blurred by centuries of salt-kissed wind. Only the faintest traces remain. Spirals, lines, and gentle wave patterns etched into the stone as though the sea had tried to write its own script upon the world. A solitary traveler arrives at dusk. Their footprints press lightly into the sand, vanishing almost as soon as they are made, washed smooth by the evening wind. The traveler pauses before the shrine, watching as the last gold of the sun pools in the cracks of the rock like liquid memory. Some believe the shrine once held scrolls, fragile sheets of parchment inscribed with symbols that curled and flowed like breaking waves. And though no scroll survives, though the sea reclaimed them long ago, something of their presence lingers. It hums in the stones. It shivers in the drifting salt. It gathers like a faint pulse beneath the soil, waiting for the one who listens with more than ears. Tonight, the traveler listens. Whispers tell us that ages ago, a monastic order lived upon this forgotten island. They were not many, only a scattered fellowship of keepers and dreamers who believed the ocean was the oldest storyteller in existence. The monks built their dwellings from coral-bleached stone and roofed them with woven grasses that sang softly whenever the wind passed through. They slept in narrow chambers carved into the cliffs, overlooking the waves, so that each night the tide would lull them into dreams of wide currents and drifting stars. Their purpose was quiet, their rituals even quieter. They guarded a lineage of tales said to come from beneath the ocean floor, from a realm where memory flowed like water, where knowledge was never still, and where truth shimmered like shifting moonlight. In those forgotten days, novices would rise at dawn and walk barefoot into the shallows. They carried blank sheets of fragile parchment, thin as breath. They would lower them into the sea, letting the salt soak gently into the fibers until the parchment seemed almost alive, translucent and trembling. The elders taught that the sea itself wrote upon these sheets, not with ink, not with visible marks, but with subtle pressure, with the echo of distant storms, with the memory of drowned kingdoms, with the soft imprint of things too ancient for human tongues. It is said, murmured the elders, that the tide speaks in ways we cannot read, but can only feel. The novices would bring the damp sheets into the shrine at the edge of the island and lay them upon obsidian slabs warmed by sunlight. As the parchment dried, faint lines would appear, curves and spirals and symbols shaped like waves caught mid-motion. Some claimed they could decipher these marks. Others insisted they were nothing more than accidents of salt. But the monks believed a deeper truth, that the scrolls were meant to be ephemeral, that their meaning existed only in the moment between wet and dry, between sea and sun, between the breath of the novice and the breath of the world. Beneath the silence of the shrine, the traveler imagines these rituals as if they were happening now, glimpsing shadows of monks moving slowly between pillars, hearing the soft drip of seawater from newly lifted parchment, feeling the warm hush of centuries dissolve in the wind. Some nights, legends say, the monks would gather on the northern cliffs, where the moonlight fell silver upon the ocean. They would chant in low, wavering tones, sounds that rose and fell like long, mournful tides. Their voices blended with the whisper of the waves until it became impossible to tell which sound came from the shore and which from the deep. The traveler walks among the ruins now, and though no voices remain, the air feels thick with memory. The island seems to breathe. The stones hold warmth long after the sun has vanished. In the quietest corner of the shrine lies what some once called the tide pool library. It is not a building, not a hall of knowledge, but a shallow basin carved into the stone where seawater gathers after each high tide. The water there is always still, always glassy, reflecting the sky with a clarity that seems unnatural. Local fishermen in distant ages believed that during the right alignment of moon and tide, the pool revealed fleeting images, spiral-shaped patterns glowing faintly beneath the surface, like words trying to form themselves before slipping back into silence. Some travelers claimed to see whole lines of script rippling like silver threads. Others saw nothing, but those who watched patiently felt a quiet stirring in their chest, a sense that they were standing at the edge of a story older than language. The traveler kneels beside the pool now. The wind has softened to a sigh. Sand shifts slowly beneath their weight. If one looks closely, closer than comfort allows, a faint glimmer appears beneath the water, as if a single memory is floating upward from the deep. Perhaps it is nothing. Perhaps it is everything. It is here, among the remnants of the tide pool library, that the traveler feels the heart of the island. A truth gentle as the sea's breath. A truth the monks once knew. Knowledge, like water, is not meant to be held too tightly. The monks believed that the ocean-born script was never intended to survive the centuries. It was knowledge meant to dissolve, to fade, to return to the sea as quietly as it came. Each scroll, after it was read, or felt, or simply contemplated, was carried back to the shore and given to the tide. The words blurred, the lines softened, the parchment melted into foam and sand as though it had never existed. Some listeners might find this as sorrowful, but the elders taught otherwise. Some wisdom, they said, is like breath. It is sacred because it vanishes. The traveler reflects on this as dusk deepens into a velvet blue. The waves glow faintly in the moonlight, catching threads of silver where the wind brushes their surface. The island seems suspended between waking and dreaming, between presence and absence. Perhaps the monks understood that truth lies not in the permanence of the word, but in the silence that holds it. That some stories exist only to be heard once, like distant thunder, or like a name whispered in a dream and forgotten upon waking. In the darkening quiet, the traveler senses the presence of those long-gone keepers. Not as ghosts, but as echoes of devotion woven gently into the stone. One can almost imagine a novice lifting a fragile scroll still damp with seawater, watching lines shimmer across its surface, knowing they will vanish by dawn, and in that vanishing, finding peace. Night settles fully over the island without a name. The shrine stands in shadow, its softened stones glowing faintly beneath a sky scattered with stars. The traveler sits upon a low step, listening as the tide comes in. The waves reach farther now, touching the base of the shrine as if greeting an old friend. Far out in the dark water, a quiet shimmer appears. An illusion of light, perhaps nothing more than moonlit foam, yet it feels like a gesture, a gentle reminder that the stories of the monks still ripple faintly through the ocean's memory. The traveler closes their eyes. Somewhere in the deep, knowledge drifts without need of parchment. Somewhere beneath the waves, words form and unform in endless rhythms older than breath. Perhaps it was never meant for human hands to hold. Perhaps these scrolls existed only to teach the world the beauty of impermanence. The wind softens. Sand shifts around the traveler's feet. The shrine seems to exhale. It is said that some wisdom does not vanish when it fades. It transforms. It becomes part of the silence, waiting for those who wander with open hearts. And so the traveler remains seated, and as the tide reaches gently for the shore bowl, letting the hush of waves wash over the last of the day. No conclusion comes. No revelation rises. Only a soft, timeless truth. That some stories are meant to dissolve like salt, leaving behind nothing but a whisper beneath the moonlit wind. And in that whisper, something sacred endures. Where memory fades, the island holds its breath. Not lost, only waiting. The river that carried dreams of empire. That some rivers never truly sleep. Even when the world grows quiet, even when the hills sink into shadow and the last lanterns dim beyond the far horizon, the old waters continue to murmur, softly, patiently, as though whispering to anyone who will listen. And so this chapter begins not with footsteps, nor with the weight of ancient doors opening, but with the gentle murmur of water beneath a canopy of stars. A sound so delicate it resembles breathing, or remembering. The starlight rests upon the river like pale Sedolg silk, trembling with every small ripple. And in that trembling, one question rises, quietly, like a forgotten prayer drifting back to the world. Where do the dreams of vanished empires go when the river that once carried them forgets their names? For a moment, nothing answers. Only the soft lap of water against the worn edges of stone. Only the distant sigh of night wind moving across reeds. Only the silver shimmer of a current that has carried far more than water. Carried voices, carried kingdoms, carried the weight of hopes once bright enough to guide thousands. Tonight, we follow that current, slowly, as though entering a sacred chamber, gently, as though afraid to disturb the memories still sleeping beneath the surface. The moon hangs low, marked by a thin halo, as if the night itself is holding its breath. Its pale reflection stretches long across the water, an unbroken path of celestial light that seems to lead directly into the past. We begin to drift, not walking along the banks, not rowing, not steering, simply drifting, letting the river decide where it wishes to take us. The current is languid, moving with the unhurried confidence of something that has known time far longer than we have. Its surface is dark as obsidian, yet woven with gleams of starlight that pulse and fade like slow heartbeats. On the left bank, shadows swallow the ruins of what may once have been a marketplace. A few carved stones remain, half buried in reeds and river grass. Their edges are softened by silt and gentle centuries. Spirals, stars, and oceanic waves dance faintly along their surfaces, as if the river itself has taken up the task of carrying their stories. On their right, mist gathers low, curling around driftwood and fallen pillars. The whiteness of it blurs the world, turning the shoreline into something dreamlike, almost unformed. It feels as though we are floating between two states of being, between memory and forgetting, between what has been lost and what still lingers just long enough to be sensed. Somewhere hidden away, a night bird calls once, then falls silent, and the river continues its whispered invitation. Whispers tell us that this river was once the very lifeblood of a grand and radiant civilization, a place where temples rose like sunlit mountains, where markets overflowed with color and incense, where astronomers traced the movements of the heavens upon polished stone tablets as the river flowed quietly beside them. It is said that the people of this land believed the river was not simply water, but a living thread that stitched their world together. They believed every drop carried a secret, a blessing, a breath from the first dawn. But nothing golden lasts forever. Even the greatest empires, whose towers pierced the sky, whose banners snapped proudly in the wind, eventually fade beneath the unstoppable passage of time, like footprints washed away by a rising tide. Tonight, as we float beneath the moon's trembling light, the river shows us how those memories survive, not in monuments or royal archives, but in gentle, flickering visions upon the surface of the water. At first, they appear faint, as if woven from nothing more substantial than breath and shadow. But then they sharpen, just enough to feel real. A lantern-lit barge glides silently across the surface, its warm glow glimmering like fireflies. A row of bears once stood upon it. Priests, perhaps, or star readers, carrying scrolls bound in bronze. But the figures are long gone. Only their light remains, mirrored faintly in the drifting reflections. Then the vision dissolves. Not abruptly, not with any sense of loss, just softly, like mist melting into the morning air. Another ripple carries a new echo, the sound of a distant song, warm and melodic, woven with a rhythm that might once have guided oars and rituals alike. Some believe it was a song of blessing, sung to guide travelers, sung to keep the river gentle, and to remind the people that they belonged to something greater than themselves. But the river holds no voice now, only the memory of one. We drift further, and the banks begin to narrow, drawing close like the walls of a sacred passageway. On the left, a row of submerged steps emerges from the water. The topmost step glitters beneath the moon, while the rest vanish into the depths. They lead downward, but to nowhere. To nothing but silence. To nothing but shadow. It feels sacred somehow, though we cannot say why. Some claim these steps once led to an underwater pavilion, an observatory, where the stars were read by their shimmering reflections, rather than by lifting one's gaze. Others believe that priests came here to release paper lanterns, each carrying a handwritten dream to float gently downriver. And there are those who whisper a stranger tale, that the steps were built not for the living, but for memory itself, descending into the very place where dreams dissolve into the slow-moving dark, where names are released, where grief softens, where the soul of an empire sinks into a rest so deep, it becomes indistinguishable from silence. Beneath the silence, old storytellers say, lies the truth the river keeps. We drift closer. The water here is cold, smooth as polished glass. The moon's reflection rests upon it like a fragile mirror, easily broken by touch. But we do not touch it. Instead, we let the current carry us onward. Far ahead, a slow widening of the river opens into a quiet basin. The surface here is so still that the sky above seems doubled, as though the heavens have sunk halfway into the earth. It is said, whispers an old legend, that on nights like this, when the water is calm and the moon is kind, the river reveals the celestial map once used to guide travelers. Ancient astronomers believed that stars walked with them, not above them, that the heavens leaned close to speak, that the river was in truth a long shimmering tablet upon which the night sky etched its stories. And as we drift into the basin, something stirs beneath the surface. Not movement, not sound, just a shimmer of pale silver, spiraling outward like a breath released in slow motion. The stars above deepen in brightness, reflected so clearly that the river appears bottomless, an ocean of light woven with threads of darkness. For a moment, it is easy to imagine the forgotten empire standing along these banks, watching the sky unfold upon the water, reading the movements of constellations that guided them across seasons, across lands, across lifetimes. Perhaps they believed the river carried the dreams of the heavens themselves. But the empire faded. The astronomers turned to dust. The scrolls dissolved into silt. And only the river remains, holding those dreams like a careful guardian, shaped not by loyalty or sorrow, but by the simple truth that water remembers everything that touches it. As we drift deeper into the night, the visions soften. The lantern barges fade. The distant songs fall fully silent. Even the ruins seem to withdraw into themselves, losing distinction, losing form. The river slows with us, becoming calmer, gentler, like a creature readying itself for sleep. Where memory fades, the world grows strangely peaceful. We pass a final cluster of stones on the right bank, carved once with star-marked patterns, now smoothed nearly to nothing. Only a faint spiral remains, barely visible beneath the moon's shy glow. Somewhere behind us, perhaps far upstream, the dreams of the old empire still drift, circling in soft currents, unbothered by time, not waiting to be reclaimed, not yearning for recognition, simply being, light as breath and patient as dusk. Legends insist the empire vanished without catastrophe. No war, no famine, no collapse. Just a quiet dispersal, like fog melting into daylight, as though the people simply walked into the horizon and dissolved into wind and whisper. Perhaps that is why the river remembers them so gently. At last, the river grows still. So still that even the slightest ripple seems too loud for this sacred quiet. The moon rests upon its surface as though laying its head upon a pillow of silver. The reflection is delicate, trembling only when a night breeze brushes past. The stars cluster around it, forming a pale constellation that looks almost familiar and almost entirely new. We float at the center of this fragile mirror, and in the presence of such stillness, the final truth becomes clear. Some dreams are not meant to be chased. Some histories are not waiting to be solved. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and fade when we demand answers they never promised to give. The river has carried empires, and memories and secrets older than stone. But tonight, it carries only this, a quiet invitation to set aside the search for meaning, to release the weight of curiosity, to float with what remains, a constellation of forgotten dreams, reflected softly upon the water, dreams that do not ask to be held, dreams that do not fear being forgotten, dreams that drift and shimmer and dissolve in their own time, like moonlight touching the edge of dawn. And so the chapter closes as gently as it began, with water murmuring under starlight, with silence deep enough to cradle sleep, with the river, ancient, patient, unbroken, carrying its dreams onward into the ever-waiting dark. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was only meant to be felt. Let the river carry you now, softly, slowly, into the quiet hours where dreams move like water and the night remembers everything. The astronomer who spoke with shadows, that in forgotten ages, when the sky carried its mysteries with gentler weight, there lived an astronomer who conversed not only with the stars, but with the shadows that gathered beneath them. Some believe her name was once written in the margins of ancient scrolls, though no ink of it remains. Others whisper that she walked the boundary between night and memory, neither entirely seen nor entirely lost. The tale begins with a single shape standing against a sky washed in twilight blue. A lone figure, poised atop a wind-worn observatory that rose from a ridge of weathered stone. The dusk gathered around her like a listening hush, and though time itself had grown thin along the observatory's edges, the woman appeared unhurried, as if each drifting star recognized her presence and welcomed her as one of their own. Beneath her feet, the platform's mosaic caught the remnants of fading light. Spirals, circles, and ancient numerals curved around one another like soft breaths. Wind sighed through the broken colonnade. In that serene air, It felt as though the world itself was preparing to dream. With twilight deepening, she descended into the observatory's circular chamber. Its entrance, half swallowed by ivy and dust, opened into a world of gentle silence. Instruments of bronze and crystal rested where they had been placed centuries before. Delicate arcs, shaped to follow the heavens, shimmering prisms to bend faint starlight, polished discs etched with constellations older than recorded time. They waited, patient as sleeping guardians. Inside, the air tasted faintly of mineral dust and cooled stone. If one listened closely, one might imagine hearing echoes of movements from long ago, the nearly soundless touch of fingers adjusting a lens, the soft intake of breath as a star shifted its position in the sky, the distant murmuring of darkness settling into shade. The astronomer paused in the center of the chamber, her palm resting against a bronze arc. Though the metal was cold, it felt alive with memory. Some believe this observatory belonged to a lost lineage of celestial scholars, those who charted not only the visible stars, but the shadows they cast upon earth and sky. For to them, the darkness between constellations was as full of meaning as the constellations themselves. They watched the bending of twilight, the trembling edge of dusk, the quiet pulse of night where no star shone. They listened to the sky not for light alone, but for what light concealed. Slowly, the astronomer began her ritual. It always started with stillness. She closed her eyes, allowing the hush of the chamber to settle into her bones. The world's sound slipped away until all that remained was the steady rhythm of her breath and the faint stirring of wind brushing past the observatory's broken arches. When she opened her eyes, she lifted her hand toward the ceiling, toward the small, perfect aperture through which the sky revealed a single thread of evening blue. With careful, dreamlike gestures, she traced the position of each appearing star. Her motion was slow, reverent, as though she were smoothing ripples across the surface of a celestial lake. A faint luminescence gathered along the chamber walls where polished mirrors caught the sky's deepening glow, scattering it like fragments of a forgotten melody. It was here in these quiet hours that she spoke with shadows, not with words, not with sound, but with the attuned listening of someone who understood that darkness holds stories as ancient as those carved in stone. She watched as the first stars cast beams across the chamber, forming slender shapes that drifted over instruments, pillars, and the mosaic floor. Where the starlight fell, its counterpart, its shadow, followed. And in these shifting silhouettes, she read the subtle language of the heavens. Whispers tell us that she had learned to interpret these movements the way one reads a sacred text. A shadow stretching longer than expected, glimmer falling slightly to one side, a line of darkness curving where it should fall straight. Beneath the silence, meanings gathered like dew. Tonight, however, something tugged at her attention. In the far corner of the observatory, half shrouded beneath a drape of desert dust, stood a slab of black stone. Its edges were sharp, its surface polished to an obsidian sheen. Few dared approach it. Some believed it was older than the observatory itself. Others insisted it had been brought from distant ruins, swallowed by the sea. Its origin was uncertain, but its presence carried a weight that seemed to quiet even the wind. The astronomer drew near. Her hand hovered above its surface but did not touch. Etched into the stone was a star map, fragmentary, incomplete, its constellations marked with delicate silver lines. But this pattern appeared nowhere in the night sky. No chart recorded it. No scholar recognized it. It belonged to neither season nor cycle. It was a pattern out of time. Where memory fades, mysteries deepen. The carved stars seemed arranged with intent. A spiral here, a stretched line there. A cluster that resembled a bird in flight. Another that looked like a broken circle. Some believe the constellation marked the path to a forgotten realm, a land that drifted between dawn and nightfall, untouched by the burden of hours. Others thought it represented a lost season of the heavens, a time long vanished when the sky carried different stories. The astronomer leaned closer, letting the chamber's faint moon silver then illuminate the map. The stone caught the light and fractured it into thin beams that crawled across floor and pillar. Shadows gathered in its carved furrows, shaping what looked like faint silhouettes. Perhaps the remnants of stars that had slipped beyond the reach of sight. Beneath the silence, something stirred in her heart. A longing, a recognition, as though she sensed the edge of a truth waiting just beyond the grasp of the knowledge. In the soft rhythm of night, she traced the pattern in the air. Her movements were slow, meditative. A gesture, a breath, a pause. With each motion, the shadows shifted subtly in answer, as if acknowledging her presence. The ritual was as ancient as the observatory itself, a communion between what is illuminated and what remains unseen. Outside, the sky deepened into velvet blue. Stars grew sharper, trembling faintly above the horizon. The wind settled into a hush, carrying the scent of distant stone. The world felt suspended, caught in a moment between inhale and exhale. Whispers tell us that such nights were rare. Nights when the sky felt tender, almost fragile. Nights when the world seemed willing to reveal a sliver of its oldest secrets. Yet even as she studied the mysterious constellation, a soft melancholy drifted into the chamber. It curled around the columns, brushed against the bronze arcs, settled near her shoulders like a gentle cloak. Because she knew, deep down, that some truths lingered just outside the reach of comprehension. They called to us not to be solved, but to be felt. The astronomer stepped back. Her ritual was complete. The shadows lay still. The stars continued their slow procession. She took one last breath of the observatory air, the scent of stone, dust, and ancient nights, and turned toward the entrance. Her silhouette framed itself against the opening where moonlight pooled softly across the threshold. In forgotten corners of the earth, some say this was the last time she walked beneath that fractured arch. Others believe she returned night after night, seeking the meaning of the constellation she could not find above. But time, as always, moved quietly on. The observatory stands empty now. Wind curls through its chambers. Bronze instruments lie in gentle disarray, their surfaces glinting faintly beneath drifting moonbeams. Dust gathers across the mosaic floor like a thin layer of forgotten years. And yet, if one enters during the hour before dawn, when shadows soften and starlight leans tenderly against stone, one might sense a lingering presence. A hush that feels attentive. A breath that is not quite the wind. The star map remains, unchanged, unbroken, etched in obsidian, silver, and silence. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it exists only to remind us that some mysteries do not vanish. They simply wait for the one who will listen with the quiet patience of night. Some voices only echo when we are ready to hear them. And so the observatory dreams on, bathed in its silver glow. Its shadows stretch and fold as the stars continue their endless turning. The meaning of the forgotten constellation drifts somewhere between light and darkness, suspended gently in the tender space between night and dawn. The orchard where time fell asleep. That somewhere beyond the borders of familiar maps, past the worn roads and the quiet rivers that murmur of old kingdoms, there lies a valley where time once curled into itself like a sleeping animal. Few claim to have seen it with waking eyes, and fewer still attempt to describe it, for even memory becomes fragile in such places. Yet whispers tell us that at the valley's center, hidden beneath centuries of drifting mist, stood an orchard unlike any other, a cradle of seasons that refused to move forward, a sanctuary where time rested rather than ruled. We begin here on a breath of gentle wind, carrying the faint perfume of blossoms long vanished. The fragrance arrives not in strength, but in suggestion, like the lingering echo of a dream upon waking. It drifts across the threshold of our awareness, delicate and ancient, as though the orchard itself exhales after centuries of silence. Beneath this soft breeze lies an invitation, a quiet beckoning to step deeper into the world of what once was and what never fully passed. Some believe the orchard was born in the age before stories, when the moon was still learning how to cast her light upon the earth. They say her earliest beams fell through the branches of a young grove, marking its leaves with soft fire. Under her full brilliance, the trees bore fruit, luminescent spheres, pale as winter stars. Within each glowing orb, it was said, rested a moment of pure memory, preserved as gently as breath upon glass. Travelers who touched such a fruit felt warmth seep into their palms, and in that warmth they glimpsed something forgotten yet beloved. A childhood laugh, a mother's song, a slow sunset sinking into a distant sea. No two fruits held the same remembrance. No two hearts received the same gift. Tonight, we walk through the remains of this sacred orchard, though the moon is timid and the trees no longer glow. What surrounds us now is a landscape softened by age. Twisted trunks lying half embraced by moss, roots curling like sleeping animals beneath carpets of green. Pale petals, long detached from any living branch, drift across the ground as if reluctant to surrender to the earth. They gather in quiet spirals, forming shapes that might have once been paths, or prayers, or the gentle footsteps of those who sought solace here. Beneath the silence, the forest holds its breath. The orchard, once radiant, now appears veiled in a faint dust of forgotten years. And yet, even in ruin, it possesses a stillness so profound that it feels as though time itself has stopped to listen. Stories tell us that the orchard became a threshold, a delicate boundary between the living and the remembered. Travelers came not only for the fruits, but for the calm that folded around the grove like a protective cloak. Here, people laid their burdens among the roots, allowing the stillness to soothe the restless ache of passing days. Some believe the orchard stood outside the march of dawns entirely, untouched by season or decay. Others insisted it existed precisely because of time's longing to rest, a place the hours themselves retreated to when weary. As we wander along a forgotten path, the ground soft beneath our feet, the world slows its pace. The edges of things, Leaf, stone, shadow grow gentle. Even our thoughts walk more quietly, as though unwilling to disturb the orchard's sacred hush. Each trunk we pass seems to carry a hint of former glow, a memory of moonlit fruit pressed into its bark. Some trees possess hollows that resemble half-closed eyes. Others lean into one another like companions, sharing secrets too old to repeat. In the soft dimness, pale petals drift like fragments of old dreams. They swirl around us, weightless, aimless, as though searching for the branches that once held them. You may notice the sound they make as they land, almost nothing, barely an exhale. But in this silence, even the gentlest sound becomes a story. It is here at the orchard's quiet heart that we find the stone basin. Carved from a single slab of moon-pale rock, it rests beneath an arch of intertwined branches. Even the trees seem to bow toward it, reverent, as though it holds the final breath of the grove's purpose. The basin is shallow, no larger than a traveler's outstretched hands, but its presence is immense. Symbols, ancient and tender, spiral across its surface. Some take the shape of crescents, thin as the first sliver of moonrise. Others resemble ticks of time, though so delicate they could be mistaken for strokes made by breath rather than blade. Scholars once studied these markings with lantern and ink, hoping to decipher the orchard's secret. They believed the basin was a vessel of cycles, a silent keeper of the hours that pass differently here. Some theories claimed that when a glowing fruit was placed within the basin, the memory held inside could be released, rising like mist to drift among the branches. Others suggested that the basin itself was a clock, but one that measured not minutes or days, but the opening and closing of hearts. No certainty remains. The scholars are gone, and the orchard, in its slumber, does not reveal its truths. We lean closer. Dust lies unevenly across the stone, gathering in the spirals and crescents like shadows pooling in carved valleys. The air around the basin feels subtly cooler, as if it remembers moonlight even in the absence of its glow. And though the bowl is empty, you may feel, if you listen beyond sound, that something once shimmered here, something gentle and luminous, now waiting in silence. Where memory fades, so too does time's urgency. Some legends say the orchard dimmed because the world itself grew too hurried. They tell of a shifting age when people no longer sought quiet places to cradle their memories, but instead carried their days like burdens. The fruits, sensing this change, cease to glow, retreating into the deep chambers of the trees where moonlight could not follow. In those same stories, time, losing its resting place, began to flow more quickly, as though awakened too soon from its slumber. But there are gentler tales as well. Stories that speak of the orchard not dying, but simply dreaming, folding its radiance inward until the world becomes soft enough for you again to welcome it. In these versions, the fruits still exist, hidden in the dark hollows of certain trunks, glowing faintly, patiently, awaiting the return of moonlight warm enough to coax them awake. We may never know the truth. Yet in this quiet valley, life does not argue with mystery. It embraces it. As we take another unhurried step, the faint breeze returns. This time it carries not perfume, but memory. A memory you may not recognize, yet it arrives with an uncanny familiarity. Perhaps it is a childhood moment, or a long-forgotten dream. Perhaps it is something the orchard recalls on your behalf. It drifts across your senses lightly, warm at its edges, then settles just out of reach, neither fully present nor entirely gone. This is the orchard's gift, not answers, but invitations. Lose yourself in the hush between the leaves, and the grove seems to breathe with you. Allow your thoughts to sink like roots into the earth, and the world feels softer, closer. Here, even the shadows appear patient. Even the passing of wind feels like the turning of a celestial page. We pause again before the stone basin, as though guided by something unseen. A single petal, pale as first snow, detaches from a branch overhead. It drifts downward, swirling gently through the cool air. Its fall is slow, almost reverent, and for a moment, time itself seems to lean closer, watching. The petal lands in the basin, and nothing ripples. The silence that follows is complete, not hollow, not empty, but full, like a held breath. It feels as though the world waits for something, a glow, a pulse, a sigh of remembrance. But the basin remains still. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in its waking state. Perhaps the orchard, in its timeless slumber, guards its memories not from us, but for us, storing them like seeds until the night arrives, when they are needed again. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As we step back from the basin, the orchard seems to settle deeper into its dreaming. The mist thickens at the edges of the grove. The trunks fade gently, as though dissolving into dusk. Even the petals floating across the ground appear to drift more slowly, their paths softened by the deepening quiet. And so, the chapter closes as softly as it began, with a breath of wind, a hint of perfume, and the lingering presence of something ancient waiting beneath the roots. Time, it seems, has chosen to sleep here still, curled within the heart of the orchard, dreaming of moonlit nights yet to come. Perhaps, someday, when the world has grown gentle again, the blossoms will glow once more. But for now, the grove rests, and we leave it quietly, so as not to wake the slumbering hours. The temple of the breathless choir. That in certain corners of the world, where the land lies untouched by time and the sky carries the soft hush of forgotten ages, there are sounds that do not come from any living voice. Sounds that drift across plains like feathers of moonlight, so faint and wandering that one cannot tell if they come from the wind or from memory itself. Tonight, our story begins with one such sound. Not a song, not a word, not even a note in its fullest form, but the ghost of one, a soft echo, fragile as dust, trembling across an empty plain of wind-shaped stone. Some believe the plain was once the bottom of an ocean, its floor carved by waters long retreated, leaving behind ridges and hollows where the wind now wanders like a patient archivist, brushing its fingers across ancient grooves. Others say the sound itself does not belong to this world at all, that it is merely passing through, pausing here for a heartbeat, before traveling onward to realms where echoes have their own kingdoms. But for those who follow the sound, for those who listen with a heart quiet enough to receive it, the path leads toward a solitary mountain to the east, a mountain whose flank holds a secret carved in stone, a doorway into shadow, framed by pillars smoothed by centuries of breath and dust. Here, lies the temple of the breathless choir, and it is here that the wandering note finally comes to rest. The temple stands half buried in its own silence, a structure not built but revealed, its chambers carved directly from the living mountain. Time has left its touch on every surface, on the fluted columns that rise like frozen gusts, on the wide steps softened by ages of drifting sand, on the archway marked by a faint spiral sigil said to represent breath itself. Marked by the moon, the symbols glow with a pale sheen at dusk, as if the stone has learned to hold lunar light the way a shell holds the ocean's echo. Whispers tell us that in ages long past, travelers stood here in quiet reverence, waiting for the temple to awaken. For at sunrise and sunset, when the winds shifted and the air cooled, the chambers inside would stir with their own mysterious song, a choir formed entirely from breathless voices. No human throat ever shaped those tones. No one ever played them. Wind alone was the musician. Wind seeking pathways through hidden corridors, moving in spirals, weaving through cracks so fine they seemed drawn by a cartographer of whispers. And from those movements came music, delicate, celestial, trembling like silvered threads pulled taut across the night. But that was long ago, and now the only sound is the sigh of the plane behind us. Yet something lingers in the air as we cross the threshold. Not a noise, but the idea of one. A presence, soft as the fading scent of incense. It guides us inward, gently, as though inviting us to remember what the world itself has forgotten. Inside, the air cools into a sacred hush. The walls glimmer with mineral traces, catching little pools of reflected light from the entrance. The first corridor curves gently left, forming a passage shaped like the body of a flute. Each indentation once served a purpose: to coax wind into tone, to draw breath into voice, to transform air into prayer. Beneath the silence, we can almost imagine how it must have sounded. A multi-layered harmony flowing through these channels, each chamber responding to the next, like a constellation answering itself in the dark. Some scholars believe the temple was a celestial calendar, every chamber tuned to a specific season, a specific moonrise, a specific alignment of wind and star. When all were in harmony, the choir would awaken in full, singing through the mountain like a living instrument. Others argued the temple was a monument of devotion, a way for ancient artisans to offer prayers that did not rely on voice. Prayers that belonged to the world itself. Breath without ownership, music without ego, devotion without names. And then there were those who thought the temple was designed to communicate, not with gods in the way we imagine, but with forces older than gods. The quiet intelligence of the earth, the deep sigh of stone, the hidden mathematics of air. We walk deeper. The passage widens into a hall where the ceiling rises like the inside of a great conch shell, spiraling upward. Patterns etched into the walls resemble waves, or perhaps vibrations, or perhaps the arcs of unseen wings. They shimmer faintly as though remembering white. Here, the acoustics must once have been extraordinary. Even a whisper would have awakened soft harmonics, slipping through the stone like luminous fish in dark water. It is said that pilgrims who stood here felt a tingling in their bones as the sound passed through them. But now the hall lies quiet, its breathless choir silenced by shifting stone, by dust accumulated in sacred channels, by time's slow folding of all things. We continue through long colonnades where slender pillars rise like the stems of ancient instruments. Their surfaces are carved with symbols of sound made visible. Curling sigils, branching lines, star-shaped clusters. Each symbol seems to vibrate just beneath the eye, as if a single well-placed note could wake them. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, some say. Perhaps the temple only sang for those who knew how to listen before they arrived. Deeper still, the corridors narrow, guiding us like a gentle hand toward the temple's heart. Here, the shadows are softer, almost velvety, clinging to the stone in ripples. The air feels cool enough to brush the edge of imagination. Scholars once attempted experiments in this place. They brought instruments, flutes, strings, hollow reeds, hoping to recreate the ancient tones, but every attempt fell short. The melodies the temple produced were too delicate, too elusive to imitate. They were not meant to be created by human will. They belonged to the meeting of wind and geometry, a partnership older than language. Some believe the temple did not merely say kiki, they believe it listened. There are carvings deep in these halls that resemble faces, not of humans, but of something more abstract. Not faces that watch, but faces that hear. Eyes closed, structure tilted, as if absorbing each tone like a prayer carried on the breath of the world. And there, beside them, curving lines depict winds flowing not just across the surface of the earth, but from above, descending in spirals from the stars. Star-marked winds, the elders called them. Winds that had crossed distances too vast for comprehension, bringing with them tales of creation, of movement, of spheres, turning in perfect rhythm. Was the temple built to interpret those distant whispers, to translate them into song, or to answer them? We cannot be certain. History leaves us fragments, and fragments leave us wonder. As we walk further, the tone of the temple changes. The walls become rougher, less polished by ancient hands. Dust thickens underfoot, gathering in small dunes where the wind no longer passes. The once open channels of resonance, slender veins through which sound once traveled, are blocked now by centuries of fallen stone. Where memory fades, silence thickens. There is a soft sorrow here, not sharp, not piercing. It settles on us the way dusk settles on water. Gently, inevitably. One can almost feel the longing held in the stone, as if the temple remembers what it once was, and is achingly aware of what it has become. Perhaps the winds still try to sing here on rare nights. Perhaps they search for the old pathways, finding only walls of dust. It is said that during certain eclipses, when the world grows dim and the sky turns the color of forgotten metal, a faint hum still rises from these corridors. Not loud enough to be called music, but enough to stir something in the heart. But tonight, the temple sleeps, and its choir slumbers with it. At last, we reach the heart of the temple. The chamber opens before us like a vast bowl, carved in perfect symmetry, its ceiling rising in a dome so smooth it reflects a faint glimmer of starlight entering from distant cracks above. In the center stands a circular pit, once the chamber of convergence, the place where all tones met, weaving together like strands of luminous silk. Here, the ancient melodies would gather. Here, the mountain would resonate. Here, the night itself would seem to listen. But now, Now the silence is profound. A silence so complete it feels alive, so deep it seems to hum with its own quiet gravity. A silence that does not merely fill the space, it shapes it. Standing here, one feels almost suspended, as though the world has paused to take a single slow breath. Beneath the silence, something soft stirs in the imagination. The memory of sound, not by the ear, but by the heart. The echo of an echo, turned inward, a whisper folded into stone. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the temple's choirway was never meant to outlast time. Perhaps its purpose was fulfilled long ago, carried away by winds that have since crossed continents and seas, threading the world with a music no longer heard but forever felt. Or perhaps, and this thought lingers like the final breath before sleep, the choir is not gone at all. Perhaps it waits, patient as stone, quieter as moonlit breath, listening for the one wind, the one alignment, the one night when the pathway's clear and the world becomes still enough for the song to return. And so we stand in the quiet heart of the mountain, letting the silence wash over like a tide of dust-lit air. Outside, the wind wanders the plain once more. The night deepens, the sky turns softly star-marked, and the temple, ancient and breathless, holds its vigil. A memory stitched to the wind, a song folded into quiet stone, waiting for those rare travelers who still know how to listen. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was always meant to be felt. And so we leave it here, resting beneath its shroud of silence, listening to echoes only the night remembers. The lanterns of the vanished harbor, that some harbors never truly disappear, even when the tides rise, even when the coast erodes, even when the last ship has long returned to dust. Their lights remain, not as flames, but as memories, tiny, trembling glows, suspended in the quiet folds of night. And so, the chapter begins with a single shimmer, a dim glow drifting upon dark water, its reflection stretching like a silver ribbon across the waves. Then another, and another, lanterns, swaying gently on unseen currents, marking the boundary of a harbor that the sea swallowed centuries ago. No ships approach now. No footsteps echo across its forgotten piers. Yet the lights remain, as if fulfilling a promise whispered before the world fell silent. Some believe these lanterns were never meant for sailors at all. Whispers tell us they were hung for those who traveled without bodies, without names. The wanderers who moved between breaths of time. Lights for spirits who sought the comfort of home long after the living had departed. Beneath the silence, the harbor appears, not as it once was in its bustling days, but as a dream of itself, a soft, crumbling outline of wooden beams and stone foundations, softened by salt, shaped by tide, coated in moonlight like powdered frost. The water rocks the lanterns gently, as if cradling them, as if guarding them. We drift closer, drawn by their fragile glow. A wooden post emerges from the water, its surface furred with sea moss, its joints swollen with centuries of tides. The lantern tied to it trembles each time a wave exhales. Its light is small but steady, a quiet persistence that feels older than the wind itself. At the edge of the shadowed bay, half buried in shifting sand, lies the remnant of the old harbor road. Once, Travelers from realms now erased from maps walk this path carrying goods, stories, hopes, and farewells. Merchants with sun-cracked scrolls, monks who studied the stars as though they were scriptures, wanderers who carried no tools but memory. Where memory fades, the road now leads only into mist. But the lanterns, those faint floating embers, outline a path more patient than stone. A path of light. A path of returning. We drift along the abandoned waterfront, moving slowly through the hush of forgotten time. The beams of the old docks press upward from the deep, like tired shoulders still trying to stand. The wood is soft with centuries of surrender, its veins soaked with salt, its joints bent into shapes resembling the ribs of some ancient sea creature. Each post is a gesture of endurance, a memory of weight and purpose. It is said the harbour once stretched far into the sea, its piers reaching like open arms toward travellers who approached beneath moon-soaked skies. And though the harbour is gone, the moon remains. Tonight, it hangs low over the waves, marked by the faintest halo, as though remembering the lives that once gathered beneath it. Somewhere beneath us, the stones of the old quay glow pale and blurred. We descend in spirit, drifting closer to the submerged quay, where wave-like carvings spiral outward across the rock. Time has softened their edges, but their meaning lingers like a forgotten hymn. Between the grooves lies an inscription, half swallowed by the tide and smoothed by centuries of breathless waves. The words no longer speak clearly, but their presence is unmistakable. A message carved for an audience that may never return. A message that once told wanderers where to find solace, where to leave offerings, where to light their lanterns so the lost could find their way home. Perhaps the people of this harbour understood something we have long forgotten. That home is not always a place of walls and roofs, but a glimmer of recognition in the dark, a lantern in the fog, a quiet moment of belonging. We drift deeper into the harbour's old heart. Mist crawls across the water like a slow-moving veil. The lanterns appear and disappear within it, shimmering, then dimming, glowing, then fading, as though breathing. The air smells faintly of salt and old wood. There is no movement except the patient shifting of the tide and the occasional whisper of wind against hollow beams. We pass an alley that once separated rows of warehouses. The doors are long gone, but the frames remain. Leaning shapes, smoothed by the sea breeze, softened into forms that resemble memories more than structures. Inside the doorways, shadows linger like distant footsteps. The echo is so faint, it could be imagination, or the reincarnation of sound itself, rising briefly from the past. Some believe that echoes never truly disappear, that they simply wait for our ears to grow quiet enough to hear them. And here, in this harbour abandoned by time, quiet is the only language that remains. In a corner where the tide meets a broken stone wall, small lantern niches are carved into the rock. Some are empty. Others hold remnants of rusted metal brackets where flames once rested. One niche still shelters a lantern, though its handle is fused with salt and its glass fogged with age. The flame within it has long gone cold, but its shape suggests a story repeated so often it became sacred. Lanterns not for ships. Lanterns not for the living. Lanterns lit for the wandering soul. We follow the imagined glow of forgotten flames through the narrow paths of the harbour's ghostly memory. every surface seems touched by time's gentle hand. Nothing broken violently, only softened into surrender. Door frames curve inward, as though bowing to the sea. Stone steps glide into the water, each one thinner than the last, as if dissolving into foam. There is something deeply tender in the harbor's silence, something that does not mourn the past, but holds it softly. The harbor narrows toward its final pier, a place once used for departures rather than arrivals. Even now, the stones seem to lean outward, as though longing for something just beyond the horizon. A thin line of lanterns marks the pier's path, their reflections wavering in the dark water. They flicker not with flame, but with memory, soft, wavering light that feels like the quiet pulse of a story trying to be remembered. As we drift to the pier's end, the mist parts just enough to reveal it. One final lantern. Sheltered in a small alcove carved from worn stone, its niche shaped like a cupped hand holding something precious. The lantern glows faintly, so faintly that it seems to hover between visibility and dream. A single flame, alive yet fragile, trembles within the glass. Marked by the moon, the light dances with the tiniest motion of air. No wind reaches this place. No footsteps disturb the pier. And yet the flame moves, softly, purposefully, like a breath from some unseen traveler passing through. Some say this lantern waits for the final wanderer to return. Some say it shines only for the moon. Some say it remains because the harbor itself refuses to forget. The truth lies somewhere in the space between these whispers. We watch the lantern flicker, never growing stronger, never fading completely. Around it, the harbor seems to breathe. The water shifts, the mist folds and unfolds. The beams creak softly as the sea rocks them. Perhaps the flame is not meant to illuminate anything at all. Perhaps its purpose is simply to exist, to remind the night that not all lights must be bright to matter. The harbor, in its quiet surrender, holds an ancient wisdom. That arrival is sacred. That departure is inevitable. That memory is a lantern we carry through the darkness of time. As the chapter ends, we leave the final lantern glowing gently in its stone cradle. The mist gathers once more, softening the pier, softening the water, softening the world. The flame trembles, but does not fade. And somewhere, deep in the quiet, a thought rises like a tide. Perhaps it waits for the one last traveler, or perhaps it shines only for the moon. Either way, the lantern remains. A tender uncertainty, a whisper of light, but a promise that even in vanished places, something still remembers. The desert of 1,000 unfinished paths. That some questions do not come to us in moments of certainty, but drift instead across the edges of dreams. Soft as wind, ancient as dust. And so, in the stillness before dawn, upon a barren expanse where the earth holds more silence than memory, a whisper rises. Why did the ancestors carve roads toward horizons they never reached? The question lingers like a trembling note, suspended in the cool air. It calls to us not for answers, but for attention, as though the desert itself has been waiting for someone willing to listen without hurry. Before us lies a land washed in the faint blue of fading starlight. A place where night releases its final breath and morning has not yet found its voice. Here, pale stone pathways stretch outward in every direction. thin and fragile as forgotten veins beneath the skin of the sand. They do not lead to cities. They do not point to water. They simply extend toward distances that dissolve into the trembling waves of heat and shadow. It is a haunting sight. Roads laid with purpose, rising and falling with the gentle sway of the dunes, yet never arriving anywhere visible. Some believe these paths were once part of a grand design, a vision so immense that only the stars themselves could have guided it. Others say the roads were carved not to reach a destination, but to honor a promise whispered between the earth and the sky. Whatever truth may rest beneath the sands, it hides itself gently, refusing to reveal more than a faint shimmer of possibility. As we step onto the nearest pathway, a soft crunch of pale stone breaks the quiet. Beneath our feet, the road feels warm even in the early hours, as though holding the memory of thousands of vanished footsteps. The surface is worn smooth along its center, as if generations once walked with singular devotion toward a horizon they never questioned. And yet the path stops abruptly only a short distance ahead, fading into formless dunes, as though the world had paused mid-sentence. Moving slowly, the desert unfolds around us. Every dune seems to breathe. Every grain of sand carries the echo of something unspoken. With each step, the listener feels the gentle tension that lingers here. A sense of ambition left half-shaped. Dreams exhaled but never inhaled again. As if the hands that built these roads were suddenly called away by something greater or more mysterious than their own plans. Rising from the sands like guardians half asleep, sir, ancient markers pierce the landscape. Pillars of sandstone stand in intervals beside the pathways, each one etched with faint symbols, softened by centuries of wind. Some bear the delicate outline of spirals, like galaxies sketched by hands who sought to pull heaven closer to the earth. Others carry star markings, constellations drawn in thin, deliberate strokes. Though many no longer match the skies above us, their patterns feel unfamiliar, as though they belong to a night long forgotten, one the universe itself no longer remembers. There are also carvings that seem more like prayers than instructions. Soft curves, incomplete sentences, lines that begin with reverence but trail off before reaching their final meaning. Beneath the silence, one senses a quiet yearning, as though the pillars themselves are still waiting for someone to finish the thought that began here. As the desert floor warms beneath the emerging light, the pathways shimmer. Not with magic, but with memory. It is said the builders believed this land held gates, hidden thresholds that would open only when approached from the correct direction. At the precise moment stars align with their earthly reflections. The roads, they believed, were to become lines of connection, threads weaving the mortal world into the fabric of the cosmos. But the constellations have shifted. Some no longer gleam with the brightness recorded on the pillars. Some have vanished entirely into the ocean of time. And so the roads that once promised passage now lie suspended in uncertainty, leading towards skies that have forgotten their part in an ancient arrangement. We walk deeper into the expanse, and something changes. The desert's breath grows warmer, its silence heavier. The pathways, once clearly defined, begin to fracture and crumble, as though resisting the notion of being followed. Some split into two directions, each as incomplete as the other. Some tilt downward into small valleys carved by the winds older than memory. Others simply end in the middle of open sand their final stones half buried, like bones, waiting for rediscovery. There is beauty in their incompletion, a gentle ache, as though each road is a fragment of an abandoned story. The closer we look, the more it feels as if the entire desert is a scroll, written in half-remembered verses. Whispers tell us that the builders were dreamers who believed the world was shaped not by destination, but by movement itself. They carved the beginnings of countless paths, trusting that their children or their children's children would continue them, extending the lines further into both land and meaning. But something interrupted their work. Something subtle, something not born of disaster but of change. A shift in purpose, perhaps, or a spiritual redirection. Whatever it was, it left no scars, only silence. Ahead, the light of the rising sun washes across the dunes, turning them into slow waves of glowing gold. In this hour, shadows soften, and the unfinished roads reveal their most delicate details. Small stones arranged with ritual precision, thin ridges that once might have held torches. The faint remnants of braided rope patterns meant to guide nighttime travelers. All these small tender touches show us not abandonment in haste, but a gentle laying down of tools, a departure without bitterness. Perhaps the builders stood one morning much like this, watching the sunlight paint the land, and understood that the paths no longer needed to be completed. Perhaps their purpose had always been the act of beginning, not the act of finishing. Deeper still, we wander, and the desert grows quieter. Even the wind seems to step lightly here. The pillars become fewer, the symbols more faded, as if this was the furthest reach of the ancient vision. It is in this thinning of markers that a final point of stillness reveals itself, a broken milestone, half sunk into the warm sands. Around it, the desert forms gentle spirals, as though nature itself has bowed in quiet recognition. The milestone bears no clear direction, no arrow, no distance, only a single incomplete line carved across its surface, an intention without conclusion. And here the emotional arc settles like dust in evening light. There is no revelation waiting for us, no hidden chamber beneath the sands, no sudden alignment of stars overhead. Only the soft truth that some journeys are meant to remain unfinished, not because they fail, but because their meaning lies in the movement, in the reaching, in the first quiet step onto a road that may never become whole. It is said that the desert remembers every intention ever set upon its surface. It holds them gently, letting them hum beneath its warm silence. And so, the milestone becomes a resting place, not of arrival, but of acceptance. The roads around it do not mourn their incompletion. They simply continue their dreaming, stretching out like whispers the earth has chosen not to raise into full speech. As we stand with them in the quiet heat, a feeling settles in the heart, that the unfinished is not something broken, but something beautiful in its openness. A reminder that some paths exist not to be completed, but to invite us into wonder. That the horizon does not promise answers, only perspective. And that every step taken with curiosity is a form of prayer, whether or not the road ever reaches its intended end. The light shifts once more. Heat ripples across the sands. The constellations, now invisible beneath the brightness of day, continue their ancient drifting above us. And slowly, gently, the desert begins to fade from our senses, not with abruptness, but like a candle at the far end of a quiet hall. its flame steady until the very last moment before it lowers itself into darkness. Where memory fades, the land continues to breathe. The roads remain, the pillars stand. The question that opened our journey drifts back across the warm air. Softer now, almost content. Why did the ancestors carve roads toward horizons they never reached? And the desert, in its infinite patience, answers with silence. The kind that soothes rather than burdens. The kind that invites dreams rather than demands certainty. As sleep approaches, the desert hums with a gentle, ageless calm. The paths stretch onward, unfinished yet eternal, carrying their quiet hope into the vastness of night. For perhaps it was never about the horizon at all. Perhaps the beauty rests in the beginning, and in journeys that continue long after we close our eyes. The tower that counted every dawn. That in a forgotten valley, so quiet that even the wind moved, as though afraid to wake the stones, there rose a solitary tower of pale, time-smoothed stone. Travelers who wandered near it spoke of a strange feeling that washed over them, as if the earth itself were taking a slow, patient breath. Others said the tower appeared only in the soft hours of morning, materializing at the edge of the valley the way a dream returns just before waking. But all agreed on one thing. When the first light of day touched its ancient walls, something in the tower seemed to stir, as though it yearned not to be seen, but simply to remember. At the base of this tower, the stones bore markings, thin grooves spiraling upward in a thread so elegant that many believed they were carved with a single long gesture sustained across years. These notches, it was whispered, were used to count dawns. Not days, not seasons, not years, dawns. Each sunrise was treated as a singular blessing, a quiet masterpiece of the sky. And so, the people who built this place etched one modest mark for each morning the world renewed itself. Some believed these builders were artisans of light, people who found wisdom in brightness the way others found it in scripture. Others claim they were wanderers who simply wished to honor the gentle rhythm of existence. Beneath the silence of this valley, one truth seems to linger. They were a civilization that understood the sacredness of beginnings. And so, our journey begins here on a morning untouched by urgency, where the air is cool and the horizon glows with the faint blush of coming light. The tower rises alone. No ruins nearby hint at a vanished city. No roads lead to its base. It stands like a patient finger pointing toward eternity, slender yet enduring. Moss clings to its lower stones, soft and green like forgotten memories. High above, the crown of the tower catches the earliest hints of dawn. For a long moment, nothing moves. The world holds its breath. Then the light comes, not in a sudden blaze, but in a slow spill, golden, gentle, as if poured from some celestial vessel. It glides along the tower's face, touching the stone with a warmth that seems impossibly tender. The spiral notches glow faintly, each one a tiny cradle of light. Some say the tower awakens in these moments. Others say it merely remembers. But all who have witnessed the light's first embrace describe the same sensation, that the tower is greeting the dawn like an old friend. In forgotten corners of the earth, structures often stand as guardians of silence. But this tower feels like something more. Not a monument, not a tomb. Instead, it feels like an offering, a an ancient hand extended toward the sky in reverence. The invitation is subtle, but unmistakable. Step inside, it whispers. Walk where the morning once lived. And so we do. The entrance is narrow, half hidden beneath a curtain of wind-smoothed ivy. When we pass through, the temperature shifts, and the air inside holds a faint scent of dust warmed by sun rays, long extinguished. A single shaft of light, slipping through a slender slit in the eastern wall, stretches across the stone floor like a luminous ribbon. Tiny particles drift within it, rising and falling in slow, graceful spirals, as if each speck remembers how light once danced here. It is said the builders crafted these slits with extraordinary precision, each angle calibrated so the sun would enter differently with every dawn. Some slits welcomed narrow beams, others allowed fuller, softer glows. Each day, the tower displayed a new configuration of light, a silent celebration of renewal. We ascend the hollow spiral staircase, our steps echoing faintly, though the tower feels reluctant to disturb its own quiet. The stone steps are worn smooth, shaped not only by time but by reverence. As we rise, more streaks of sunlight slip through hidden openings, painting shifting patterns on the interior walls. Warm ribbons of gold unravel before us, dissolving gently as we move past them, like memories receding into silence. Higher up, the chambers grow smaller and more intimate, as though the tower wishes to guide us inward toward a quieter part of ourselves. In one chamber, we find an intricate design carved into the floor, a spiral of sunbursts, each one unique. Scholars once wrote of this floor, believing each sunburst represented a dawn deemed extraordinary, an eclipse, a rare alignment, a morning touched by unusual color. But perhaps the meaning was simpler. Perhaps these carvings were made by hands that simply wished to honor the days that had moved something in their hearts. Above this chamber, the next level reveals more carvings, smaller, lighter. They resemble breaths rather than symbols, soft curves drifting across the walls like trails of whispered thoughts. Some call them meditations etched in stone. Others think they capture the shifting moods of the morning, from the palest grey to the deepest gold. Beneath the silence, we sense an almost tender devotion in these carvings. The artisans who shaped them did not carve to impress future generations, nor to immortalize kings. They carved to remember how mornings felt. Where memory fades, these stones hold fast. Further upward, the tower narrows, and the staircase begins to feel less like a path and more like a ritual. Each step carries us closer to the heart of the tower's purpose. The light here is softer, more diffused. It settles gently on the stone, creating halos where it touches. It is here that whispers tell us the artisans would come at sunrise, sitting quietly as light drifted into the chamber. They would not speak. They would not pray in words. Instead, they would let the sun itself be the prayer, the offering, the teacher. To them, dawn was not merely the beginning of a day, it was the moment the world inhaled, resetting itself before exhaling into whatever the hours ahead might bring. A sacred turning, a breath of the universe renewed. And so, this tower became a kind of vessel, a tender archive of all the mornings the world has ever known. Each notch outside represents a counted dawn. Each chamber inside holds the echo of a morning once cherished. We ascend still further. The topmost chamber is small, surprisingly so. It feels less like a room and more like a pause. a gentle interruption in time. Its walls are bare, save for one inscription carved carefully into the stone. Beside it lies a small cluster of notches, fewer than expected, and there, on the upper curve of the Schäsel, rests one final marking, unlike the others. It is deeper, more deliberate. It is said this mark corresponds to a dawn that never came. Scholars who studied the tower debated endlessly about this anomaly. Was it a miscalculation, a poetic symbol, a prophecy? And if so, of what? Some believe the artisans expected a certain celestial event that never occurred. Others think it symbolizes the morning the artisans themselves vanished, leaving their tower behind. A few whisper that it represents the dawn of endings, the moment all cycles reach a still point before beginning anew. But perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps it was a final acknowledgement from the artisans that even in a life devoted to counting mornings, some moments remain beyond measure. We linger in this quiet room. Dust glimmers in the warm glow, floating gently like the soft remnants of forgotten dawns. Nothing moves. The silence feels alive, shimmering with the memory of thousands of mornings that once flowed through this place. And then, slowly, the light begins to fade. As we descend the tower, the chambers dim one by one. The light thins, softens, withdraws. Outside, the sun lowers behind distant hills, touching the stone with a final kiss of gold. In the gentle hush, the tower no longer seems like an instrument that counted dawns. It has become something quieter, something more akin to a companion of the sky. It neither measures nor records. It simply witnesses. Where memory fades, the tower remains. A silent observer of beginnings, of the tender unfolding of each new day. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And here, in this valley of stillness, the tower's voice is a soft one, woven from dust and light, from patience and time. We stand at its base as the last glow slips away. The spiral notches fade into shadow. The valley grows still. And for a moment, it feels as though the world is holding its breath again, waiting, not for answers, but for gentler questions. Perhaps the tower was never meant to count dawns. Perhaps it was built to remind us that each new beginning, no matter how small, is sacred. Or perhaps it was meant to guide us inward, toward the quiet places where our own dawns wait to be noticed. As the sky darkens, the tower dissolves into silhouette, simple, patient, eternal. And the day, counted or not, melts softly into night. The garden hidden beneath the shifting stars, that in a forgotten age, on a plateau where the horizon dissolves in starlit breath, there once shimmered a curtain of light so delicate that the sky itself seemed to exhale it. Some believed it was a veil woven by ancient hands, a thin celestial fabric marking the place where heaven stooped low enough to kiss the earth. Others whispered that it was a gate, an invitation for wanderers who moved softly enough to hear the sky's quieter voices. Tonight, as the world settles and the night folds itself into gentle shapes, we step toward that plateau in thought alone. No footsteps echo here. No wind dares disturb the silence. Only a soft glow, like crushed silver dust strewn across the heavens, beckons us forward. Beneath this trembling tapestry, lies a hidden sanctuary, veiled for centuries beneath shifting stars. It is said that those who once found it never intended to claim it. Instead, they approached with bowed heads and slow breath, as though entering a dream that required permission to be seen. For beneath the celestial curtain, nestled within stone and shadow, lies a secret garden. A place shaped not by mortal ambition, but by the rhythm of the sky itself. The entrance is unmarked by grand walls or towering gates. It reveals itself only through a narrow archway carved into the plateau's edge, its surface etched with constellations, so faint they appear only when touched by starlight. The carving resemble not the familiar patterns we know today, but older ones. Clusters that once guided forgotten travelers across oceans of sand and memory. We pause at this threshold, letting our eyes adjust to the quiet glow. Beneath the silence, the garden breathes, and as we step inside, the world beyond the arch falls away like a distant dream. Some places do not open, they unfold. A stone path leads downward, spiraling softly as though guiding us into the earth's most patient heartbeat. Each step carries the faint scent of night-blooming flowers, blossoms that reveal themselves only when the sky sways in a certain ancient rhythm. Their fragrance feels familiar yet unnameable, like a memory we once lived but can no longer touch. The air cools as we descend. Here, the night is not a cloak of darkness, but a gentle companion. Moist mineral whispers rise from the stones, brushing against our skin with the softness of forgotten rains. Terraces rise around us, their edges shaped like half-remembered star maps. Each level seems aligned to some celestial order, their orientations carefully chosen to mirror clusters scattered far above. It is as though the architects of this sanctuary wished not to imitate the heavens, but to invite them down to earth. Pools, still as obsidian glass, lie between the terraces. They reflect the sky with such clarity that it becomes impossible to tell where reflection ends and reality begins. Some say the pools were once used to listen to the stars, not through sight, but through silence. When the wind passed over their surfaces, it carried messages too delicate for language, leaving seekers transformed in ways they could never explain. Whispers tell us that no single culture can claim this garden. The symbols carved into the stones bear hints of many traditions. Spirals, reminiscent of oceanic migrations, crescent markers common among desert star watchers, and floral motifs echoing ancient mountain sanctuaries. It feels less like the creation of a people, and more like the convergence of wanderers who carried their sky memories in their hearts. As we walk deeper, time loosens its hold. The night does not advance, it hovers. Even the stars appear to shift more slowly here, drifting in long languid arcs, as though reluctant to abandon their watch. This is a place that welcomes only quiet questions. It offers no clear answers in return, only stillness, like the pause between two breaths. To our left rises a terrace, arranged in a spiral, echoing the slow turn of distant galaxies. Each stone is smoothed by hands long gone, yet they seem to pulse with a faint inner glow, as if storing the memory of rituals performed beneath long-lost skies. It is said the spiral terrace was used at the year's turning, when the sky shifted and the stars rearranged themselves according to ancient cycles. Seekers would sit along the curve, eyes closed, listening not for sound, but for alignment. waiting for the moment when earth and sky felt briefly in sync. To our right lies a terrace shaped in parallel lines, mimicking a river of light known to only a handful of early astronomers. Some believe this pattern marked seasonal guidance. Others claim it represented a celestial migration, a trail of spirits moving silently across the firmament. Everywhere we look, carvings whisper subtle meanings. Star-marked petals curling around stone pools, crescent shapes layered like lunar memory, tiny spirals etched into stair edges. None of them shout. They barely speak. Their power lies in their quiet, the way they wait to be noticed without ever demanding attention. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places built not for worship, nor for study, but for listening. This garden feels like one of them. A sanctuary where knowledge was not extracted, but received. The old scholars, or so the legends say, believed the garden was an observatory, not of stars, but of the human spirit. For here, one was meant to sit beneath the shifting sky and feel its movements rather than map them. To discover truths whispered from beyond, one needed stillness deeper than silence and patience older than time. Some descriptions even call it a mirror of the heavens, not because it reflected star patterns in stone, but because it allowed seekers to glimpse the constellations within themselves. Perhaps that is why the terraces align with celestial pathways. Perhaps that is why the flowers bloom only when the sky breathes a certain way. Perhaps this place was built for those who wish to understand the dance between their inner world and the cosmos above. There is a kind of humility in such design, a recognition that wisdom arises not from mastery, but from surrender. Beneath the drifting veil of stars, the garden teaches not by revelation, but by presence. Even now, though abandoned, it feels alive. The air hums with a faint vibration, like the gentle echo of something that once moved through these stones. Something sacred, something patient. At the heart of the garden lies a pool unlike the others. Wider, deeper, and impossibly still. It mirrors the cosmos with almost perfect clarity. The sky above and the water below seem indistinguishable, as though Earth has opened a quiet doorway into the heavens. Some say the pool reflects not the stars we see, but the stars we forget. Others claim its surface reveals constellations that no longer exist, preserved like luminous fossils in the dark water. We kneel beside it, breathing softly so as not to disturb its serene surface. The reflection shimmers gently, as though breathing with us. For a moment, we cannot tell if we are looking into the sky, or if the sky is looking into us. Where memory fades, the pool remembers. Where words fail, the pool listens. One legend tells of a traveler who once returned here every year, believing the pool allowed him to speak with those he had lost. Whether or not it was true, the story feels right. The stillness feels right. There is something tender in the way the water holds the night. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps its purpose is simply to be witnessed. No one knows who tended this celestial sanctuary. No one knows what hands placed the stones, what hearts shaped the terraces, or what quiet devotion watered the night-blooming flowers. The garden offers no origin story. It cradles no conclusion. It simply exists beneath the stars, waiting for gentle footsteps that may never come. As we rise from the silence of the pool, a soft breath of starlight drifts across the water, blurring its reflection. The mirror trembles, then settles, as though tucking itself into slumber. We step back slowly, mindful not to break the hush. The terraces fade into soft shadow. The flowers close their petals. The carvings shimmer once more with faint celestial dust. And the garden, the living map, the sanctuary of breath, the observatory of the heart, becomes less a place and more a dream, carved in stone and kept safe beneath shifting stars. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some secrets only bloom in the quiet hours of night, and some sanctuaries remain veiled, waiting for those who carry enough stillness within them to see. As the curtain of starlight folds itself once more across the plateau, we leave the garden in peace. A hidden place beyond the borders of time, lingering like a soft exhale at the edge of sleep. A memory, a whisper, a dream that remains. And beneath the vast, shimmering night, the garden rests, silent, eternal, and waiting.